Tonight's episode of People I Want to Talk To is sponsored by The Right Flay. The Right, W-R-I-T-E, Flay is a cookbook for starving writers. It was written by Bobby Flay's younger brother, Jimmy Flay. Jimmy, if you don't know, is a fiction writer who never achieved anywhere near the level of success of his older brother, as he was always more interested in writing than cooking. This is not to say that Jimmy lacked the culinary skills necessary to become an Iron Chef. In fact, when it comes to throwing down in the kitchen, he and his brother Bobby are equally matched. However, due to his chosen profession, Jimmy spent his entire adult life struggling to pay the bills. To keep his passion for writing, as well as himself, alive, and to let the world know who the Right, R-I-G-H-T, Flay is once and for all, he combined his God-given talents and wrote a cookbook, which contains over 100 tasty recipes, all of which cost pennies to make and can be washed down with a satisfying glass of tap water. If you, like Jimmy, have sacrificed everything, including fame, fortune, and a healthy, well-balanced diet, to put words on paper, The Right Flay is for you. Visit therightflay.com to purchase your copy today, and don't forget to enter code PEOPLE at checkout to receive 10% off. All right, another sponsor in the books. Thank you very much, and let's start the show. Thank you for tuning in to People I Want to Talk To. I am your host, Jason Sarna. And tonight my guest is David Wolinsky. David, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I first met David, or Dave is what I typically refer to him as, or what I was used to calling him back when we were hanging out in the flesh. But I first met him in 2008, which I'm not sure if he knows, but he will soon enough. So what happened was I applied to an internship in Chicago at the AV Club, which was an entertainment section of the satirical publication The Onion. I was a big fan of The Onion in my early 20s and figured the internship at the AV Club would be my ticket into writing the funny stuff. On April 16th, 2008, I sent an email that read, and this email was addressed to the internship for The Onion, or for the AV Club. I said, "Hello, I'm very interested in the internship. I've attached my resume, cover letter, and writing samples. If you need these materials sent by mail, let me know and I'll do so. The writing samples are pretty much all technical documents I created in college. Thanks." And then I put my name, my phone number, and email. So there must not have, I don't think that's that impressive, but there must not have been too much competition back then, because I was invited downtown for an interview. I was living at my parents' house in the suburbs at the time, so driving to the city for an internship opportunity at a publication that I was passionate about was pretty exciting. Once I got downtown, I parked and made my way into the building where I met David Wolinsky. I remember sitting in an office and talking about my writing background and love of movies. I think one of the movies we talked about was Crash, which I remember saying that I liked, but I don't think Dave liked it, which is fine. But anyways, I thought the interview went okay, but I was young and naive at that age, so who knows? I really have no idea as far as like how to gauge that. So basically, so on May 6, 2008, so about less than 2 months after, I received an email from David that read, "Dear Jason, thank you for your interest in the summer editorial calendar position with the AV Club and for taking the time to speak with us about your qualifications. You have many skills and abilities to bring to an organization. There were a number of qualified final candidates for the position, and our decision was a difficult one. We have selected another candidate whom we believe closely matches the requirements of the position. Best, David Wolinsky." So then, and I responded to that email 30 minutes later, this is kind of where I was at that time, like very desperate. I responded, I said, "All right, but if you need any," and I put "any" in all caps, "help with minor things like a minor internship or something, less hours, responsibilities, etc., I can do that. I don't care what. Thanks, Jason." So basically, flash forward to 2010, I'm taking improvisation classes at the Annoyance Theater, and I see this guy in class that looks familiar. I'm pretty good at remembering faces, but I couldn't place him at first. I eventually learned his name and remembered the AV Club interview, and when I searched David Wolinsky in my sent emails, I discovered he was, in fact, the person who interviewed me. I'm pretty sure I told Dave about it, but he didn't seem to remember. But whatever the case, we became friends throughout our time studying improv together and kept in touch throughout the years. A few months ago, I received an email from Dave asking how things have been going, and we've been having lots of email conversations about life, working, improv, philosophy, Zen, and all sorts of stuff. So that's kind of a background, and to kick off the conversation, I guess I'll start with the Onion interview and if he remembers that or not.
So this is like a how dare you kind of conversation, or no? I mean, I definitely remember it. I remembered it when we met years ago.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. I mean, how long ago was Annoyance? So 2010. I mean, you still have the emails. I still have all my emails too, but it didn't occur to me to look them up, in anticipation of us talking. But yeah, I don't know what the question is in there other than I feel bad about it still. And those decisions are even though you and I were the only ones who met, if this doesn't sound like passing the buck, it's I don't know. It was a weird time at that publication for everybody, and there was more to it than just me deciding. It was just that I was available. I was available, and other people weighed in, and there are all sorts of, dumb and weird politics involved with those things all together. But I don't know if I ever apologized to you. Or,
no, I don't. I don't want an apology or anything. I just thought I was thinking how to frame the interview. And I just thought of that, it kind of popped in. I was like, oh, yeah, that's kind of a funny little thing.
That's funny and weird, yeah.
Yeah, and it's looking back, I don't think I was that qualified. All I had for, a writing sample was, I didn't have, a journalism degree. My degree was in law enforcement. So it's I wasn't, an attractive candidate on paper. So I don't...
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't go to journalism school either. And I feel I've always had this kind of semi but not real complex about it, feeling oh man, I missed out on learning all these things that everyone else knows.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, to get to your question, I totally remember that, and it just feels kind of weird to be yeah, but it was weird for me, it was weird for me too.
Well, I think I remember asking you in improv, and I think you're oh, I don't remember that, or I can't remember what you said, or
I may have been just less blunt in those days, or maybe I was going through other stuff where I was I don't know, but in hindsight, it's that's kind of a shitty thing to do, to be
well, I think both.
I don't know if I remember.
Yeah, both of us. I don't know. We were younger at the time when we were doing it.
For sure. Yeah.
I just didn't know, and I thought because I'm I hope it doesn't come off as a passive aggressive thing. How dare he? This was my chance. I think the a lot of what we've been talking about through email, almost the illusion of almost what that could have given to me. My idea in my mind, the AV Club to me, I didn't really care about writing. I think it was writing food reviews or something, food reviews, and I didn't really care about that. It was I just saw it as a thing, oh, I'm going to go here, do this internship, and then I'll start writing for The Onion, writing satirical.
Oh, I don't know if we ever talked about that, but that I think, this is such ancient history. This is 10 years ago. Feels 5 lifetimes ago for me, but a weird thing about it's such a confusing thing. So being at The Onion, yes, I was an editor at The Onion, but it splinters further where it's I worked for a company called The Onion, but I was an editor for the section, the AV Club, as you were talking about. And then when I would be, doing stuff like improv classes or doing performing or things, even with like people in bands and stuff, like I think there was like this weird. I even remember like relatives too, where there'd be like this weird thing where it's like, oh well, you work for the Onion, well you must think you're hot shit or something, or there would be the inverse where it would be like, David, you have the power to make me famous. You have the power to make my dreams come true. Like you have to do this. Whatever this is, and the reality is like they really were like hammering into like all of us that like there's a clear distinction between the Onion and the AV Club, and I feel like the only people who make this distinction are people who work there. And so I don't even remember like whose decision it was. Like, oh, let's not have Jason in here. Like, he's not fit for it. Like, I don't think it really matters not having like a journalism background. I think it's like, do you have skills and do you have like, you know, the drive to like go off and do stuff on your own. But I do know that like at that time, a big thing they were allergic to is like people who wanted to write for the Onion and saw the AV Club as a path to there. And of course it all got jumbled, like after they had like layoffs and totally cut the section where I was at, where they like shut down the New York office, and then the Chicago Onion actually became home to all the comedy writers. I don't know too much about that time, where I think it got maybe a little bit more incestuous, but they were really down on like people wanting to come in and like try to break in. I mean, even at the beginning, all this COVID stuff, I got somebody, you know what, I would look up that email. I don't want to name the name, but it was so bizarre where someone was like, I want to write a satirical thing about the coronavirus, and I saw somewhere that you worked for the Onion. Can you introduce me?
Just a random person?
Yeah, this was like two, 3 months ago. So this is like this is a thing that's probably a lifelong thing.
Continues to haunt you.
I'll be in my grave and people will be knocking on the coffin. Hey, I have an idea for a headline. And I think like for me, it's always like people don't really believe you when you're like, yeah, I work there, but I don't really know all those dudes. Like I know some of them, but
well, there's just I feel like the outsiders always think the insiders, no matter where you're at in the company, know like so much more than they actually do. It seems like.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's funny to think about that time because working for those places, people really don't want to hear that those are like jobs, you know? Like they don't want to hear about like how it's stressful or the politics or the weird personalities. They kind of want, like I remember at that time people always being like, oh, I loved this, you know, I love this one headline or I love this one article or whatever. And I learned quickly like never to correct people like, oh, actually, you know, that's the Onion, that's not the AV Club. And I really learned quickly to be like, just sort of nod and smile and, yeah, I don't know. I mean,
did you start it, or when did you start working there? And did you know that clear like differentiation between the two when you started, or?
I mean, I think instinctually. I mean, I remember like just, you know, like hungrily reading every. Before the internet, before you know, like every print issue, you know, reading it start to finish, and I was aware that like AV Club was like, you know, pop culture criticism stuff and local event stuff, but I don't think I ever really thought too much about like this sort of rigid church and state thing until I was there, and just like the levels of exhaustion and fatigue from bosses and managers where like they really wanted to, you know, keep that boundary reinforced. But, you know, the flip of it is like, so when did I start? That's a good question. Obviously before 2008. I want to say 2006, maybe.
So you were there for a few years, or for a decent amount of time?
Yeah, before you and I had met, and all that is just sort of a crazy story. Like how I got started with the writing career, how I reluctantly got a writing career started, like everything I tried to do to avoid it doing.
So what, because you said
writing.
you didn't do journalism, so what were you going to do originally?
I don't know. I graduated in '05 from Middle Tennessee State University. I got my degree in music business.
Oh, yeah, music, yeah. I think I remember. Yeah, I think that's starting to come back. It's weird emailing you or talking to you and thinking back. It shoots some memories in my brain from like...
Well, I don't think we've seen each other for like 8 years, but we have popped up in each other's email inboxes. I don't know. Do you keep in touch with
Well, it's weird.
With like other Chicago improv people? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Mark, you know Mark, obviously.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, Mark Hendricks. Yeah.
So him, a lot of Second City people, just because I don't know, Second City for some reason I felt like the most bonding was Second City, because I think they make you stay through the beginning, A through E programs. They make you typically stay within your group.
Yeah.
So basically, from that group, I know like Mark, this girl Kate, my friend Al, Ray, Christina, and that's pretty. So I have a pretty solid group from there, and we actually were just on a Skype call not too long ago, maybe like a week ago, with a bunch of people, because Kate was having a baby and everyone's stuck inside because of this virus. So we keep in touch like that. And typically when I go back home and to visit, we'll typically grab some pizza. It's typically like me, Mark, Al, and Kate. But so it's definitely there. And then some people from the Annoyance. I feel like the Annoyance was second as far as like maintaining friendships or creating things.
Yeah,
and then IO was just like, fuck all those people.
I mean, it's funny because for me, I think it's been, even though I think I spent much more time in the Second City, is people I've met through Annoyance who I've stayed more in touch with. And I'm totally out of the loop as I've kind of bounced around and done other things. I have no clue what the character of these places are like nowadays, but I think like, I don't know. I mean, I remember really liking just like the sort of stuff we were doing at Annoyance. Like I think it's like the lazy ways to be like, oh, it's all punk rock and Second City is pop rock or something, or it's top 40. I mean, Second City is definitely more polished. I don't know how interesting the specifics and the weeds of this stuff is for your listeners.
It doesn't matter. They don't. I have like maybe one, if that. So yeah, okay. I mean, the more
hopefully we don't piss them off.
Yeah.
Sorry, one person. I don't know. I mean, I remember just like the appeal for Annoyance is like the kind of like the encouragement to be weird, and I really liked the way that they sort of were, you know, a little bit more honest about like what it's really like.
Oh yeah, definitely
on that line, you know. And I just remember just weird freaks is the main thing I remember about my time there. But it was like it was. I mean, I think I mean. So it's been interesting. I don't know why it is that like you don't really know who you're going to wind up staying in touch with. But there's definitely you and a couple other people from Annoyance that like I still sort of swap emails with from time to time, even as we've all kind of spread across. But the short answer I think was like 2006 was when I started.
All right.
And I'm sorry, man, that it didn't happen.
No, it's fine. I don't need like I don't like blame you for it. I don't have any resentment towards it. I think I think I was bummed at the time, but then I don't know. I think like I don't think it was something that I would have been great at, because I just like I was mostly using it as a stepping stone. And I think I remember in the interview us talking about that and me still being okay with it, but I still think in my mind I was like, you know, I was an idiot back then. I was like, how old was I at that time? 20. I was like 24, maybe.
We both would have been basically kids. I mean, I graduated college the year before I started there.
All right.
I don't know. I mean, I had that internship. That's how I got started there. And I was kind of sort of lucky with like timing and my attitude and my drive with like just wanting to get a job, and there with like stuff going online, there was an opportunity there, but like, yeah, I mean, there wasn't a lot of writing in that internship. There was a lot of like, it sounds so prehistoric now. There was a lot of like combing through every venue in Chicago, entering it into a spreadsheet, like every event happening for a week.
Yeah.
And that sounds like, oh, how long could that take? But you would spend like Mondays through, like, and there were deadlines for it. It would be like Monday through Wednesdays would be that. There would be like stuff where you'd like have to transcribe interviews for staffers. It was a lot of thankless stuff, although as the organization grew, like I don't know. I mean, I probably could have been better at that job, but there were definitely people who like never bothered to learn the interns' names, and they just were kind of. I don't know. There's a whole mess of personality quirks over there 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But it was all a lot of thankless stuff. So I think it's sort of a fluke that it turned into like, you know, a legitimate writing job. For me, I don't think that could have happened before or after. It was just random luck of when I was there and them kind of taking a shine to me. It's funny, do you remember Crash? Because I remember when I first interviewed there, they hassled me about The Godfather, which I hadn't seen, and they were like, "Oh, well, we may not hire you because you haven't seen The Godfather." Blah 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 blah. So I don't know. I think things there are like very awkwardly, like the stuff that's supposed to be professional, like no one really knew how to really do it. Like the way to do everything there was definitely like passive aggressive emails and maintaining. That's the thing too, is like these things seem like they're going to be fun places to be. But there was always like funereal silence there. Everyone in headphones, air conditioning, blasting, people just talking on iChat, even though like we're all within, you know, like we're definitely closer. We're just working in there. There was like 10 of us, and we would just be in each other's faces all the time, but no one would ever be talking. So I'm not trying to make it sound like it was less fun, but it was definitely a weird.
Well, I think
opportunity. Yeah. I mean, I'm glad I had it. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
It's I don't really know what it's added up to for me since then, or for other people I've known there. So it's not necessarily a ticket anywhere.
Yeah, that's basically how I've seen it. So you were basically you were in the music industry major, I mean, back in school, and then you just applied randomly for the internship just to see. Man, so I don't know what your experience was with college or how interesting it is. I just sort of didn't understand the point of it. Of college?
And I think I felt like it's kind of like it'll lock you in place. Like you need to decide when you're a kid, like what you're going to do the rest of your life. And I kept like doing a semester on, like I think I like went to Columbia in Chicago one semester, took a semester off. I think I did local, like Prairie State one semester. I just like kept flip-flopping on like, is this for me? Do I really know? Like I probably should have just taken like a year off. Instead I wound up taking a year and a half off between semesters, like one semester on here and there. And I don't really know what I was thinking. I think it's just like I had been performing a lot and I was in bands, and music business just seemed like a natural extension after so much time, like just kind of farting around.
Were you doing anything else besides music, or were you just taking like gen ed classes, or were you actually taking like other specialty courses designed more towards career?
Yeah, so the program, so all this, like, it should be noted too, like, all this education was going on when Napster was happening. So all my professors and stuff, no one could really agree on like how to teach students about how working in the music industry should work or will work, because just all the rules were changing. But it was mainly, you know, like I took classes in like music publishing, artist management, I don't know, artist publicity, all sorts of things, copyright law. And I took one class, entertainment reporting and writing, just sort of on a fluke. And it led to my getting an internship at Rolling Stone in New York. That's actually the context for all the improv stuff. Is when I was living in New York for a summer, I took a class at UCB. I think maybe before they really blew up, like it was in a bad neighborhood and the training, like annoyance. The space, this is, I think, before annoyance.
Did you have like any of the big teachers there, like Poehler or Besser or any of those?
No, they were. I think two of them are on the West Coast, right, and two of them maybe are on the East Coast. Maybe I saw one of them perform that summer, but I didn't have any of them as a teacher. I had. I think because of the way it all stacked up, I wound up having two teachers because I just wasn't going to be in New York long enough to finish out one class. And I think the two teachers I've had there, I don't know, like you'll see them in like very minor roles on Netflix comedy stuff now where they're the goofy security guard. So they're not quite on the level of, recognizability as those UCB but that really was just like, that's how I got started.
And what did you, why did you even decide to do that? Like what was the drive to get into improv or comedy?
Well, I was just obsessed with comedy stuff and
just as a kid.
What's up?
Just as a kid, like just growing up, you just always
just growing up. I mean, like I would know what episode of The Simpsons it was based on the couch gag.
Oh, Jesus.
or like watching Kids in the Hall every day, or all these things. And so I was aware of UCB. I think this might have been around the time when maybe their show was taken off the air. I don't know. Like when I was growing up around Chicago, like I rarely went into the city. I never saw this stuff live for some reason. Just like being out of my natural environment. Yeah, I mean, growing up, it was mainly like performing in bands, and a lot of the stuff in bands was like, I think it comes from that same impulse of why I like improv, which is like, can I go in front of a group of people and do something really ridiculous, largely to entertain myself under the auspices of it being entertainment for others. Like in high school, I did Battle of the Bands.
Oh, nice. Yeah, we had that.
I did a thing called noise generators with like everything spelled with like numbers and Z's and very obnoxious. And it was me on stage with a guitar. And it started off, it sounded like it was going to be like a pretty ballad or something. And I hit a sour note, and then slowly, like it would all sort of devolve. And I had tape, like a tape player set up to like an amp, and I had like a keyboard going, and like it went from being this thing that was like, oh, this seems like this is going to be kind of lovely, to just being this like wall of terrible loud noise. I'm sure I have a recording of it somewhere. It was a bizarre thing. It just like it got louder and louder, and every band had a 15-minute limit, and they wound up like shutting off the electricity to get me off stage.
Oh, wow.
It was this bizarre thing though, I'll never forget, where like people thought they could end it by like standing and clapping. They thought they could like, all right, that's that. Yeah, that concludes that. So I don't know. I mean, that's like the weirdest stuff I was doing in bands, but like, a lot of bands with like MySpace songs posted online.
What other kind of bands, like, were you like doing a Trent Reznor? Were you like yourself doing electronic stuff? Were you in actual bands of like people, and like what kind of?
A variety. I mean, there was definitely like goofier, stickier stuff. Like there was a friend I had down the street named Peter Snyder. We would like hang out after school and like write stupid songs about like the lemonade stand we had when we were kids, or we were just like jamming and doing weird stuff, all the way up through. I remember we would go to this coffee shop nearby for their open mic, and we would do stuff like under the name of like Hot Buttered Face, where we would, I don't know, it was very bizarre, like tightly wound, sticky, dumb stuff, where definitely the thrill of it is more like, we can't believe we're subjecting other people to this. All the way up to, like, there was like a quote-unquote more serious band that I was in called Robo Dream Date.
All right.
Which is definitely sticky as well, but like we like recorded an album that got written up in the Sun-Times.
Oh, damn, really?
Yeah, but I mean, it was all like goofy, conceptual, like, oh, robots are coming to destroy, Earth, and they're gonna kill all humans. It's like really like pre-Tenacious D kind of like goofiness. So I don't know where Trent Reznor falls into all that, but it's definitely like a Nine Inch Nails fan. Yeah, so I don't know, like I never did like the comedy and performing stuff, so I think like when I was away at school or when I was in New York, it was like, well, I don't have my guitar with me, this might be like a fun new thing to try. Who know, it's like, I don't know if we've ever really talked about like, well, how did you start, with improv stuff? And I mean, I think you've stuck with it more than I have, but you're in more of a position than I am right now to do that.
Well, I got into it just because, I was living in LA for a little bit with my friend Paul, who was going to school out there to be a drummer. Then I came back to Illinois, and my friend Courtney told me about Second City and said they have sketch writing there. And I was like, I like comedy as well. I didn't know it as much as you did, like The Simpsons, or I didn't have things memorized. I just always kind of enjoyed comedy for the most part. Like I was a big Three Stooges fan, big Simpsons fan. A lot of movies, and just started in sketch. And then basically the sketch teachers were like, oh, if you want to become a better sketch writer, take an improv class.
Do you think that's true, though? I mean, part of me... well, what do you think?
As far as a sketch and improv?
Yeah, I mean, do you think one really benefits the other, or is it like training centers trying to push more product on you?
I think at the time, and still, I kind of tell people about it and kind of make a joke about how it's just them trying to make more money or whatever. But I do think, I don't know if performing it, like when you're on stage, if that... I think it does help a lot. I mean, I think more so just watching it, and I think watching what engages you as an audience member with people on stage, just kind of like acting out. I mean, like kind of like the bare bones scene of improv, like how that would play off as like a sketch, and you start seeing like what is engaging, what doesn't work. I think a lot of like energy stuff you pick up on as far as whether or not a scene has an energy, and it's kind of hard to explain. You could just kind of tell though by looking at it. As also like the confidence of the actors, the performers, just so I think there's a lot of it for sure.
I think it's true. I think like definitely like taking those introductory level classes, like I don't think that like if your interest is in writing, you need to like become a master at like object work. In fact, I don't think anyone we knew back in those days was like any halfway good at it.
No.
But I think it's like there's a lot to be said for something that gets you out of your head, and I think it does sort of wake your brain up to like, here's kind of a different way to think creatively. And I mean, there's even like that, that UC, I don't even know if it is UCB's slogan anymore. Their whole thing is like, don't think. And I think that if your interest or your main output is writing, it's like so difficult to be in that place where whether you struggle with like judging whatever you're writing, or I guess like that's like a big one. Like I think that's really the value of I think just in general.
Yeah, definitely.
And I know that was the thing that we were talking about anyways. Like it does bleed through into the rest of your life, or it can. I think that's a truly valuable thing. But just hearing you say that again, like I was like, yeah, when I hear it now, less in the rotation of those classes, it does kind of sound like they're saying like, hey, well, yeah, you want to do this? Well, you should definitely sign up for our $500 one afternoon seminar on vaudeville, or something like that. I think, yeah. So I don't know. I mean, that's I guess to me it's like the same muscle, like whether it's playing with bands, although arguably the bands I was in, although there was definitely musicianship, it was definitely a high degree of performance art, I suppose, to be generous.
Do you still have like your, but yeah, really quick on the improv stuff though. Yeah, so I got into it like that. I was basically like a loser, had nothing going on, so got into it. That's like in a sketch, but like improv, like you're saying.
I was just going to say that, like, the thing not being said and knowing what episode of The Simpsons it is based on the introduction.
Yeah.
Is a roundabout way of saying, like, I had very few friends and I was watching a lot of TV. It's not anything to brag about. Yeah.
Yeah. It's good though. I mean, yeah, I like watched it. I just didn't know stuff on that level. And I remember being jealous of people who did and being like, oh, I wish I had that comedy history that ingrained in me. Like even especially when you go to start studying the stuff and you just start lining yourself up with or comparing yourself to other students and where they came from, and it's like, damn, it's like these people really did a lot more work than I did, or they know a lot more than I do, or whatever. But
yeah, it's funny. I think there reaches a point where with all that stuff, it's funny because it kind of echoes the journalism school stuff where it's like, oh, well, I never actually studied serious acting. And I think at Second City, that's the thing they kind of drill into you that falls under the umbrella of what we're talking about, which is like, well, if you want to be good at this thing, you gotta know about this other skill. I guess like nowadays, these kind of conversations, I think it really has to do about like, well, what are your goals? Like what are you looking to get out of this? Mm-hmm. And I don't think any of those like improv things I was doing, I don't think I was ever thinking of like, what's the goal with this? Like, you definitely run into people who are like, oh, I want to be on Saturday Night Live, or I want to go to LA and make it, whatever that means. But I don't know.
I mean, I was the goal person, but I didn't know I didn't know why. Like once I got into improv, it was like mostly torture for me. Like I enjoyed watching it, and I was like, oh, this is going to make me a better writer. But then I got like sucked into it somehow, and next thing you know, it's like I'm taking every program from every possible thing, and I'm doing it for like 5 years. I'm like, what the fuck is going on here with this? And I think I was using it. I think I was using it like a lot of people use it, and even because I teach it now out in Reno, and I think a lot of people use it as like a therapy. Like, I think a lot of times I'm like, I should just been seeing a therapist instead of...
Well, that's what all that stuff started as, like, it's a way to socialize, like, traumatized children. So it's always interesting because, like, I really felt that way at Annoyance, that I think these were classes that you had with me where there would be people in those classes that are, like, using... Man, I just remember, like, were you at the McNapier level? Were we in the same class at that point? Or
I don't know if I think, because I thought you guys took, like, because she was, like, you and your girlfriend at the time.
Right.
Together. I think you guys took off, like,
it might have been some
a semester or something like
that.
But I mean, that class was fucking crazy with Mick. I mean, the thing I was in, there is some crazy shit going on, and at the same time, like guys, I mean, stuff that would not fly. I mean, in this culture, like guys pretending to be one time, I remember the shower scene where this one dude was pretending to be a woman, and he was like soaping his pussy, and he was like just. Like being super vulgar about it.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about Annoyance. Like I remember in mixed level class we had like because there's a thing where you do a show, I guess, and people come out.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
pay tickets. And I just remember the first sketch, like our class was so huge, they split us into like 2 quote unquote troops or teams. And I just remember the first, lights up, a woman on stage sitting in a chair, and there's another guy with her in the scene, and she says, "Dad, stop raping me." And I don't know what it is about annoyance where people are like, yeah, this is. I mean, I think like they empower you to like make moves that like without thinking about them, but that's the other thing about annoyance too, where it's like, well, you can think about it a little. I don't remember the rest of that scene or what happened. I think that's one of those things where it's like, well, you have to pull lights because where is this gonna go?
Well, they would always pitch like too. They're like, we're the only theater in Chicago where you could kind of do and say your own thing and blah blah blah. Like they were really prideful about that. So I think like pitching that thing, like for me at least, it's like it gave me complete freedom to be, which is why I love The Annoyance so much. Like I really like Second City just because it was like I never did it. I made a lot of good friends, but then The Annoyance was like to be an artist and to really express yourself. And like I think people should express themselves, which is completely non-filtered and non-apologetic when it comes to their art, which doesn't seem to be the case nowadays. But a funny thing though, when I was taking the Annoyance class, I was in mixed class. I don't know if I ever told you this. Like I was in mixed class on Saturday, which was the last level of the Annoyance where all hell's going loose. And then I was in level 1 at IO on Sunday. And I was doing some shit at bringing the Annoyance shit to the IO level 1 and got in some trouble there.
No, you never told me about this, but I can imagine.
Yeah, one scene I was doing some scene about something, and it was like my wife left me for another man, and my child was there, and I called her. I was like, yeah, your mother's a cunt or something like that. I said, I basically said the C word. And after I did the scene, the teacher at the time, she's like, oh, I hope you're not like that in real life or something. I'm like, oh yeah, I am. Like it was kind of a very weird, odd thing for somebody to say. Like it was like she thought I was like that and blah, blah, blah. So then anyways, like I was like, well, I'm not doing that anymore. Like I was like, I'll just play all nice, positive choices here because that's kind of like what it seems like I should be doing. So I did. And then basically when I went in level 2, Susan Messing was my teacher there again over at IO. And she pulled me aside and she's like, hey, what's this I hear about? You're doing a bunch of misogynistic shit. And I was like, oh my God. I'm like, are you serious? She's like, yeah. She's been, told me about it. She's like, and Susan was super cool. She's like, yeah, I've worked with you and I don't know. And I kind of just told her what went on and we just kind of talked it out. And then I responded to the teacher who I had in level 1. And she was basically like completely still kind of ticked off about it. She said that a lot of the women felt uncomfortable around me and that I was, that I didn't say just cunt, I said useless cunt. So she like memorized exactly what I said, and I'm just like, it was about that time where I was like, I think it's about time I get out of this. And
so you just bailed on IO? I
stayed through the whole program, like
really?
Begrudgingly. I kind of just
whole year,
yeah, because I'm one of those people who can't even finish. I'll have to finish a movie or have to finish a book that I don't like, and.
No, I'm the same way. I get it, but that's such an awkward start to a year.
It sucked. And then, so then I had that, and then I was like, once I was done with that, I was like, all right, I'm done. And it kind of just going back to the Annoyance, it makes you be like, yeah, it's like it's that freedom to do and say whatever. And like IO, it's like, I don't know how they are now, but it's just like, I don't know. It's like play to the top of your intelligence, but it's like, I'm not that smart and I say dumb shit. So I guess I can't perform at that theater.
I mean, my memory of you is like, Mark was great too, just because I had never seen or played with anyone like him, just the sort of stuff that he would throw out. But I just remember that you had like this really like fun intensity. I don't know if like I don't know if you felt like maybe not because of what you're saying. I don't know if like you played differently at Annoyance compared to IO. But that's my memory of you and other people that I know from back then. Like I have one friend who like his only memory of me at IO is that I played dogs in every scene. And I was like, I could think of maybe one time where I was an animal, and it was like one of those things where they were like, someone said there was a dog in the scene, so I was like, yeah, whatever, I'll just jump in and be the dog, because that should be dramatically interesting, right? What am I gonna do? Like pee on something? I don't know. Like, there's definitely something to be said, or it's like, yeah, you should jump out there before you know what you're going to do, but you can also take like half a second and think like, do I really want to do this?
Yeah.
It's really the strongest choice I could make.
Yeah, I think that I remember, I'm trying to think like what I think fun intensity was, I liked being intense and just fun and goofy and weird. I pretty sure you were the same. I mean, I don't know if you were as intense, but I remember you just having very out there ideas and kind of like avant-garde, I guess, sort of things.
I remember like when you finish IO, I remember like they can give you feedback. I guess like on what Noah, if Noah is even still doing it.
Yeah.
Is that even the right name? Yeah, where like you can find out like a very terse half sentence of like, you know, his diagnosis of where you're at.
Yeah.
And I remember like meeting in the office to hear it for, it sounds so, I don't know. The whole way that those things are formalized are so weird. But I remember like the feedback was like, yeah, David is, he has the intensity of a rabid animal or something. I was like, what does that mean? Is that good? Is that bad? Should I be more like a rabid animal? I don't know. There's definitely something like when you do have weird intensity to you, I think you run into people who think it's like some sort of like it's effortful. Like It's, like I'm sure for you it's like just what you do naturally.
Well, I'm such a nothing person in real life. I'm such a like in class I just sat there and, you know, just was nice and polite and barely talked to anybody. But it's like, I don't know. It's like if I don't know. I think a lot of thing in life for me, it's like roles. It's like if I'm in improv, I could play some crazy character. If I'm in real life, I'm act nice and cordial. So it's like to get a stage that allows you to kind of be whoever you want to be. And I don't know. My also thoughts on comedy, like I was saying before, are just kind of like there are no rules exactly. Like you could kind of do whatever you want. And it's just like starting probably from that IO class into now, like even now, one of my teammates, or I coach a team out here in Reno, and one of the members said, or one of the guys on the team said something, and somebody who's a member of the organization got mad, and it's like we got a talking to, and then I have, over saying retard. It's just like,
I don't know. I was all these positions reversed. I was in the position of I was teaching at Second City, and for a writing assignment, we had a student chose to for this one assignment, like he came in and he read, like you go around, you read what you did, and then you talk about it and you offer feedback. This guy wrote a thing that was like 2 pages, single spaced, about the importance of swallowing after oral sex. And like, I don't know, maybe it takes 5 minutes to read 2 pages, and like, just like, that's the thing, like they never really train you for, like that sort of stuff is going to happen when you're like teaching and you're responsible for
definitely
like nurturing people's creativity, and you definitely don't want to be like feeling like you're censoring people. And it's like, the good thing about like the assignment being this long is I have some time to think about how I'm gonna handle this one. I don't know if this happened with you at IO, but like after that class, like even though I tried to, mend things and make sure that it was handled as respectfully and you know, like sternly as maybe it was called for. Like you know, there were a couple people who like just dropped out after that
of the class.
From the class, and so I don't think there's anything that like. I don't know.
Did you have a talk? Like, what did you do? Like, did you read it out loud? And were you like during the reading, you're like, oh shit, here we go.
Well, they read their own assignment out loud, so I could just see many of the female students getting, you know, more and more uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You know, and then it's that weird thing too, where it's like, well, we still have 2.5 hours to go after we navigate this one minefield.
So what'd you do? Like, how did you?
I don't remember. Honestly, I mean, I remember, you know.
So he was basically saying, like, it's important that the women swallow my cum because...
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's like, I guess it would be one thing if it was, like, funny. Then it's like, all right, we have some stuff we could talk about structurally here.
Yeah.
But it was, like, just this, like, weird, tense, awkward thing. But I also remember... You know, like that's the thing. It's like you would expect it to be an annoyance, but like that was at Second City, and I can remember, you know, subbing in teaching for an improv class there, and there being like I don't know. It's like it's basically like another kid. It's like, hey, I brought in this thing. It's like an idea for a scene that's all about me reading my suicide note. I don't know. It's almost like maybe people should wait until their 30s to do all that improv stuff because. There's all this weird baggage you bring to it.
Yeah,
and, like,
definitely.
There's all these weird ways where you're like trying to behave like an adult. Where like, I remember just like so many scenes about couples where like their arms are around each other's shoulders. It's like that's how you know they're married. Hey, honey.
I know. Yeah. Well, even me, like I'm 26 or 27, whatever. I'm like, oh, my fucking wife left me, the fucking cunt. It's like, what the fuck? It's like I don't have.
That's why you should be the dog, man. Like,
yeah, I know. That's a better choice. Oh god. Yeah, but I've had weird. I mean, teaching is strange. Like you're saying, there is no guidebook, and it's kind of like you're just flying at the seat of your pants, and. It's like, you know, like from teaching improv now for like 2 years, it's like I've been in situations where shit's gotten physical on stage with people, like mostly guys going after other guys. Thankfully, hasn't been much creepy stuff with guys and women physically. But then there's also sometimes when guys are like in their 20s and they're like, you know, they probably shouldn't be in improv, or they're just going through some shit. They're saying like bitch or something like that. So it's like, I don't think I'm right. And it's like, how do I handle this shit? And I don't
know. The interesting thing about teaching is you just like, you walk into the room and they all think you know like all the answers, or like you know like what to do. It's a really weird feeling, I remember. Because like I went from like years and years of classes and definitely, you know, having a resume outside of it, but like it's like, how did I get teaching experience? Well, I just started teaching because they let me do it.
Yeah, exactly.
But I don't even remember like how many like interviews and hoops and things I had to go through to get there.
I can imagine, because you were at Second City, right?
Yeah, I was teaching at Second City. Yeah, and I had was teaching like in their writing program, and ever the freelancer, I had like created some classes to make sure that like, well, I can teach this, and well, I'll do that next term, and because there's always people who can teach, you know, improv 101 or writing 101, especially in Chicago, where I mean, there's such a large faculty and it's such fundamental stuff that yeah, but I remember that being just like a very profound feeling, like starting the first class, and however maybe hiccupy it was, like everyone just knowing, like, well, he's a teacher, so he knows what we should be doing.
And sometimes it's like I feel like some of the students, they just stare at you, like just like looking at you, like I'm just like I don't know. There's one time I remember some kid was saying something about, like, I was talking about like entrances and exits, and like Mick was pretty strict on, from the annoyance, for those that one person who's listening. So Mick from The Annoyance is always big on like, open the show very presentable, say, be very like straight and to the point. Don't be funny. Don't do this. Involve the audience. Just give very clear directions as far as like what's about to go down. And I was like explaining that to a class, and this one kid's like, "Oh, well, that doesn't matter. It doesn't." I'm like, "Yeah." "Yeah, it does." And I was like, and he's like, "Well, why?" I'm like, "Because I'm the teacher and I say so."
You're bringing back memories of. There are definitely also students that want to try to prove they maybe know more than you. I remember there was some writing thing where this one student kept bringing in every week like parodies of the movie Taken.
Nice.
So this will really date it in time, but I would be like, yeah, like this is getting a lot of laughs and stuff, but like you don't want to just be relying on like pop culture things that are pretty ephemeral. Like I don't know, there's this like weird thing I remember I used to always talk about in my classrooms there about like it's like you're there to learn a creative skill, craft, trade, whatever. But there's it doesn't matter whether it's improv or writing or what, but like there's still this like reluctance people have to take risks and to seem vulnerable, or to like just sort of be like, yeah, I'm a freak and these are my weird freak ideas. And I think that's sort of the point of those kind of classes, is like be who you are. Don't worry about how other people are going to react, although that gets into tricky territory because then you get the kind of performances and assignments you and I were talking about. But like I definitely remember, whatever. I mean, it runs the gamut. And I think that like similar to The Onion, there's stuff where like you're teaching comedy where I don't know, people just get kind of weird about it, even though when you're teaching, you're really there to help them. So I don't know, man. There's not really a question in there, but that is like a memory of those experiences, like a definite through line from time to time where, I don't know, maybe they're skeptical, maybe they want to test what but there's definitely like this attitude of like, well, I mean, I remember getting a note like that once at Second City too, where someone, like a teacher was like, David, you're having too much fun. So, I mean, there's all types of approaches to it, I guess is what I'm saying.
Did you like teaching and like?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I miss it. I definitely would do it again if I had a chance, although I feel like my approach would be different in some way, I guess just because I'm older. Like I was always fixated on a Second City, like don't use this stuff to be like career students. Like don't just be, I think I don't know if that's just a particular thing there's a risk for in Chicago, but like, it's funny because I feel like in the beginning I talked about not being very goal-oriented with the stuff, but I definitely was not interested in like going from program to program for years and years and years, because I think there's definitely a risk of that happening. So I was always very much minded towards like use this to work on your own stuff, be working on your own stuff. Like, yeah, you're making friendships here, but like be mindful that when these classes end, like you're going to be, what are you going to be doing?
That's good. That's great. Yeah. Something like you never hear.
I think that's what it was, honestly. I think like when I started off teaching, it was like, oh, well, I'll just be, I think this is a thing I guess all teachers do, is like you be the sort of teacher you wish you had.
Yeah, definitely.
Maybe, and a lot of that's shaped, I think, in the beginning by like, it's almost like parenting, although I have no kids. It's like no kids that I know of, right? it's like you start off like strongly like going in the opposite direction of like all the kinds of teachers who you like had friction with. Like I don't think I would ever say to a student like, you're having way too much fun. Where the fuck do you get off?
Yeah, that's an odd thing to tell somebody.
But yeah, man, like, I mean, I did some other teaching too at like a couple of universities and stuff. And it's always a thing that's sort of in the ether, like talking to people in teaching or in academia, or that's like another thing that I'm sort of kicking around now, is like trying to figure out if there's some way to get back into teaching this fall, because just I think universities are going to be scrambling to figure out how they're going to adapt to this stuff if people don't feel safe to come back.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I really do miss teaching, and I really do miss performing, but like, it's so funny because like I remember coming up with that stuff. Like I would run into people who don't do it anymore, and I would be like, "Well, why didn't you stay with it?" It's just kind of funny that like for me that's kind of where I'm at now. But I do think about this stuff all the time still.
Just like improv and sketch and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, like I wish I was doing that sort of stuff more. I think it's more like the sort of I guess philosophies or mentalities they try to like instill in you, whether intentionally or not. I honestly don't know that I've really talked to other people who have gone through these programs. Like, hey, has this been a thing that's like changed the way you look at life and the way you approach life? Or
I think it has. I mean,
Yeah.
I've had conversations with other people, like my friends at Second City. Like my friend Al and I were talking this past Christmas. We were out to eat, and he was just saying a lot how it's just failure was big for him. Just like knowing that he could go up on stage and fail in life, and like knowing that that's a skill that you could obtain in life. And he's like that I wouldn't be in my position that I am now, like in his job, because I think he started taking more, like through improv, he started taking more professional risks, because if he failed at whatever he was going for, he knew that it was okay. So it's like, I think there's a lot of things like that within improv. And I mean, for me, it's also recognizing like what it's trying to do. It's trying to just get you to be in a present moment and just react and be like 100% present with the person you're with. And it's like so many people just aren't that anymore. And even myself, I'm guilty of it all the time. I mean, right now, like in this conversation, I'm getting stupid calls and text messages, and I mean, thankfully I haven't been looking at, I looked at the phone once and it kind of threw me off, and I was kind of pissed. I was like, God damn it, I'm having this conversation.
Thankfully I only responded to 12 of them. Yeah. So, I don't know. Like, I guess you're talking about being present. It's funny, like the kinds of things in the rear view, like what I remember from all those years of classes, all those years of performing, all those years of like basically just like being an idiot with strangers and taking it seriously. I don't remember because that is the thing that like you do stay with like a cohort of people, and some of them do follow you from one place to the other, so it's kind of all mushy and blurry. But I do remember like getting into this semi momentary heated disagreement with someone when we were like practicing for some show, and there was like a person who in our group who, like, you know, she was a performer, and I think she felt like it was her responsibility. It's funny how like all these like personal things about you, you know, and your attitude towards others and towards relationships and goals and things, like they kind of manifest in the way you approach performing this stuff. Like I remember there was someone, like she felt like it was her responsibility to quote unquote like save the performance, so she would always be like coming out and kind of trying to quote unquote save scenes. And I still remember this conversation that I had with her in front of everyone, where I was like, you know, we were talking about it, and I was like, well, what's going on? And she's like, well, I could tell they were going to do X, Y, and Z, so I wanted to come in and help steer it towards A, B, and C. And there's this phrase I remember saying to her that I still think about, which is like like you're judging a moment while you're in it, and if you're doing that, then you're not present for it. How do you know what's going to happen? And I guess like if I had to distill down all that stuff into one phrase, it's that whole judging a moment while you're in it. It's like it's a thing you can't do. But I think like we're so hardwired as humans, like we want things to turn out well. We want to be in control. It feels scary and weird to be like, well, whatever's going to happen is going to happen.
Yeah.
And honestly, if you screw up on stage in an improv thing, I think there's just like this heightened thing where people tie like, oh, I got to get on a team because that's going to lead to, sort of like you were talking about with The Onion, where it's like, well, this thing is going to lead to that. I mean,
yeah, there's a lot of pressure. I mean, the whole thing. I mean, and somebody like that it's like you're doing exactly what you shouldn't be doing in improv, which is, like you said, judging the moment and
plus judging others too.
Yeah,
I think that's the thing I didn't even really dig into, but it's like, I think that's really what I like about that stuff, and what I still kind of carry through is like being really comfortable not knowing where things are going. And I find, as a civilian now, less who intersects with this stuff less often, other than like conversations with you and a couple of other people. It's like a language I know how to speak, but most people don't know it, don't think about it, and maybe don't think that way.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like this is so far removed from like 2005 in New York, where like I'm meeting people at UCB and we're going out for drinks afterwards, and like people will not stop doing bits. I remember being annoyed.
Definitely.
I remember being so annoyed, or it's like, can't you just be a person? Like, so I don't know. I think that I probably drove those people nuts too, because like that I guess was part of paying for the classes. Like you have to subject other people to your bits for hours.
Oh man, yeah, that's definitely true, and like everything you're saying is just so spot. I mean, I feel like there's even more. I mean, I didn't understand improv. Like I was kind of like you're saying, you're just in New York or UCB or Second City or whatever, just going through the motions, going out with friends, not really thinking about it. But now that I'm older and after doing it for, I did it for like 5 years straight almost, and getting out of it, then teaching it again and going back to it, and also just like. So learning what it's really about, and then like learning how to get comfortable living in that uncertainty, which I think is something that I personally struggle with my entire life. And if you could get past that, it's kind of freeing to be in that situation. And I think for improv too, like if I went, it would be kind of fun to perform with that mentality, because it's like, I don't know if I've ever really did. I did sometimes, I feel like, but not a lot. A lot of times there was judgment or thinking about things, and I didn't see myself on SNL, but even if I bombed or did something, it was like the end of the world back then.
I think it's hard though, because it's like these are lofty philosophical positions to take, and then the reality is like, can you try to transcend and be present and not worry when it's 11 p.m. on a Sunday downtown Chicago and you're performing in some shitty bar. There's like three people in there. Like I can't tell you. That's another memory I have. It's just like, how many shows like that?
Yeah,
like,
we did one. I remember that me, you, Mark, and like two. I remember we did one. It was like an open room we did a show at, and it was.
Did we?
Yeah, I think this is the one show we did together. You guys were doing shows, doing something else.
Oh, yeah, the four of us, that's right.
And then somebody couldn't make it, so we went, and it was just there was barely any people there, and it was like just in a square area, like no stage. And I remember thinking, like, I'm just going to go fucking crazy. Like, I just didn't care. And it was actually the super odd, interesting, funny show. I remember it being that way, and I just remember... I think the low numbers of people just made me just not care if we bombed or whatever happened.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really mind about that. I know for some people it makes them, it ratchets up their nerves because they feel like, oh, there should be more people here, and am I wasting my life? And am I any good? I guess I do remember. Do you remember any specifics about that show?
I can't remember exactly. I can't remember exactly what was going on. I just remember there was like a cart, like it was a carpet. It wasn't a stage or anything. It was just like some bar on the north side. And
was it downstairs somewhere? It
could have been possible. I can't really remember, but I just remember doing it. And I remember it going over fairly well. And I just remember we were all kind of on a level of just playing, back in the annoyance days, probably just playing goofballs and weirdos and
and dogs.
Yeah,
dogs. And misogynists. Yeah.
So yeah, that was so going back. So then that's all an improv thing. So then what were you doing at the Rolling Stone? Like that was just an internship?
Yeah, so that was an internship. Again, sort of like just a right place, right time, right mentality thing where it was a real weird class that I had because I think it was like billed. It's like, oh, you're going to review concerts and we'll go cover events. And instead it was a lot of like, well, Al Gore is on campus because his dad, I don't know if he went there. Al Gore's dad has there's like Gore Hall at Middle Tennessee State. So there was a thing where like Al Gore was on campus and it's supposed to be like writing about bands and musicians and stuff. And I remember like the first thing, like there was like a sign on the door that was like, class today is rescheduled. Go to such and such room. And, you know, it was like a small square room where like maybe there was like 30 people or something in there. Where we got to see Al Gore speak, and it was like the assignment instead of reviewing this concert is to write up Al Gore's speech. So, I mean, other assignments I did a review of Shrek, which I guess also dates this in time. I mean, I did whatever the assignments were, and I guess the professor, she was impressed and introduced me to an editor at Rolling Stone. And I really had just, for many reasons, done everything I could to avoid embarking down a writing career. So it was just very funny where it's like I went out of my way to avoid these types of things, which sounds very, I don't know, like a dumb, humble brag, but it's just I was very aware that like it's not a good career path and there's not a lot of money. Not that that necessarily is a thing that drives me, but yeah, it led to like an internship, not unlike the one that you were that we met before in 2008. I think I had like a summer-long project of tracking all the updates and announcements for the Live 8 concerts, which I don't even know if that rings a bell for you.
Is that a band, Live 8, or is that like a show? Or
Live 8 was like a festival.
Okay.
It was a series of concerts all over the world that summer in 2005. So
yeah, I just knew Ozfest and Jamboree back then.
I think it was like a spiritual sequel to Live Aid. So it was like it was like a benefit happening all around the world.
Gotcha.
And my bosses didn't want to be bothered with like tracking all of it, so they're like, David, you go and keep track of this. And I remember just like going and you're so busy in those things, like. And like we were all in cubicles, like I was like next to the IT guy or something, and I remember he shared his iPod with me one day. He's like, "Hey, I have the new White Stripes album, like a couple months early. Do you want it?" And I was like, "Yeah, all right," because I was just like desperate to have any human contact with any other person. I just remember like it's so funny because like people hear like, "Oh, you worked at Rolling Stone, that must be so glamorous," and like my main memory is like walking down to Central Park and like eating lunches by myself in these like sad plastic bags.
Were the people as tuned out as they were in The Onion, like you were saying, like just kind of oblivious of one another in a way?
I think it was even more corporate because there were like cubicles and it was more regimented. Like every morning, me and the other interns, like we would gather around our boss's cubicle and like pitch them stories to maybe cover. Not that we would necessarily write up. I mean, I did a little bit of writing, and honestly, if I didn't have that internship, which like I had the balls at the time, like they offered me the internship, and I told Rolling Stone, like with no like professional writing experience other than this one class, I was like, yeah, I have to think about it. Let me get back to you. That's not that many years before you and I met.
Oh, man. And why did you say that? Were you just seriously contemplating, like, I don't know if I want to go down this writer path because of all that stuff you were thinking about?
I think I just didn't know where the hell I was going and what I wanted to do. And I think I still thought, like, oh, you take an internship that locks you in a path. And I think that I had this, like, snobbishness of, like, It's like, well, I don't even really respect Rolling Stone magazine. I don't think they're like plugged in with what's going on.
Well, you could have been the one to bring him up to date if you.
Hey guys, I got the new White Stripes album. Have you heard of them?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what was going on. I guess like in contrast to like where the state of media and everything is now, it's like. I'm not saying like, oh, it would have been better if I didn't go down that path, but like I don't even really think that way. It's like, well, what's done is done, and you know, I mean, it led to The Onion, which I'm not still sure all these years later, like what that might be leading towards, but careers and all that is a whole other mess. Like I can't even imagine for people who like go all in on like improv and they think like this is going to be my future. I mean, there's definitely a thing where like it is mostly young people in their 20s there, and every once in a while like you do run into like the person going through a divorce or like the token like retiree or something.
Yeah, the old man improv, you call them.
The old man improv.
But you said you didn't coin that. You said someone else.
I don't remember. I definitely remember that phrase being thrown around in the offices at Second City. So it's got to be a thing since time immemorial.
Well, you were the first one who told me it, and like right as soon as you said it, I started cracking up because I knew exactly who my old man improv was. It was this guy who looked like Robin Williams with glasses, and he owned Wendy's franchises in like Indiana.
Really?
Yeah, this guy, just an old guy who I think he was, I don't know if he retired from that or he was in his 50s or lower 60s for sure. And then it's like just going through, it's like once I knew the term, it's like, and was aware of it as a thing, I just saw them all over the place and they continue to haunt stages everywhere.
I mean, it's a thing. I don't know. I mean, it's funny. Like I remember after the Rolling Stone thing, there was a short-lived reality show that next summer. What was it called? It was like like I'm from Rolling Stone.
All right.
And I don't know if you even remember this show.
I don't know. It was on like TV, like this.
I think it was on. I don't know if it was on VH1.
Okay.
Or what was it on? It may have been on MTV or VH1 or one of those, but like they sent these letters out to like everyone who had just finished interning at Rolling Stone asking if we wanted to audition to be on the show. Like the reality show is like just following an intern around at Rolling Stone. And I remember looking at it. I probably still have the letter somewhere. I was like, there's no way I'm going to try to be on this show because it's gonna be so boring, like showing me like eating my sad plastic bag lunches like
alone
just,
at the park.
Like yeah. Like researching for stuff and not doing a ton of drugs, not drinking a ton, not sleeping with people.
Yeah. Well, every once in a while you could throw up the devil horns and stick your tongue out, and maybe that will be the music part of it.
Yeah. I don't know. That's I don't know. This is all like ancient history stuff, so I could go on and on and on. I don't know if it's still interesting to you.
No, yeah, for sure. I mean, it's fascinating. Again, I think it's the whole thing of the insider from as you. I mean, from the outsider's point of view, it's like when I think of like when I thought of The Onion, for instance, it's like, damn, this is it. This is going to be people cracking up, busting jokes, or even if it was the AV Club, once I understood that, it's like these people love movies, music, entertainment. They're just like, these are the people you want to be around. And then you, like with Rolling Stone, it's like, all the musicians and this and that I don't, just from the cover alone, just looking at the cover, never being really much of a reader of a magazine, it's like, oh damn, that's gonna be like a badass place. But I feel like I don't know if I'm like unique in that I do that, but I feel like I do that to everything, and it's always typically so much. It's not nearly as interesting or fun as it is in my head.
Yeah, I mean, there was that old Simpsons thing too, where like Bart tries to visit Mad Magazine, where like I don't know if you remember that, where like I think it's like I think it's like a normal thing to associate, like, oh, this is like the output is pretty fun, so this must be pretty fun people. Now I just feel like I'm ragging on it all these years later. But I definitely I understand that time much clearer, and I think I understand ways it definitely was good training for, same with the improv, stuff I'm doing now or stuff I'm interested in now or my approaches to stuff now. But yeah, man, I mean, it was a weird time. There really aren't even print publications anymore. I think there's more comedy publications, but I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't really know the state of Funny or Die. I think they had a pretty rough go of things too.
Yeah, I think they they were huge in years ago. I remember during the time we were all doing those classes, I remember just came out and it seemed like it was all over the place, and now it's I barely hear anything, or it's sometimes I'm I don't know if it's that or what exactly the reason is, or maybe I'm just older now and I'm just not paying attention to it, or So were you interested in writing as a kid, or were you just kind of what even got you, or were you just one of those things where you just took a class and you just had a encouraging teacher?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and I kind of anticipated maybe being asked about it. So I guess I could say oh, it runs in the family, sort of my dad. I mean, I mentioned being written up in the Sun-Times before. This is a coincidence; it has nothing to do with it. My dad worked for the Sun-Times for a long time, pretty much the entire time I was growing up. And he's just always been a newspaper guy. And he did a book or two. He has another one that I think is finishing up this year. So I grew up my mom was a librarian. She wanted to be a teacher, and she did do some teaching as well. So I guess I sort of grew up always being interested in reading, always being I don't know, I definitely had an aptitude for when there would be writing assignments in school, but I never really, because I grew up with it and I'm just so used to it being in my house, I never really thought of it as a skill that I have and a thing I can do maybe well, until I honestly want to say a few years ago. I think I had to be working as a writer for more than 10 years for me to even understand oh, this is actually a thing that I have I think that I'm pretty decent at. I don't know what it was about growing up where I didn't recognize that. I think growing up I had a lot of anxiety around well, what am I going to do when I grow up, and what should I do on these dumb career days? I remember, oh, I really love the Indiana Jones movie. Maybe I could be an archaeologist, but not really. I just remember those career day things, being dumb sources of kind of childhood stress, where it's I don't even know what to tell people, but all the while I would be just writing, and I don't think anything ever big ambitious. I mean, it was writing music. It would be writing stuff in journals. It would be drawing a lot. I think just I was always interested in being creative in some fashion, and through to today, where I don't know, I feel I kind of take all those sort of, I don't know, I feel I'm not being clear, and maybe you could just repeat the question again. But I guess I just sort of resisted going down that path, I guess, because I just heard growing up so much how not lucrative it is, and just how there are cutbacks coming everywhere. And I mean, I don't really think the music business thing was oh, I'll go work in the music business, but that idea was quickly stomped out when music industry was suing its customers, and there were just tons of layoffs happening and CD sales dropping, and so it just didn't seem a stable place to go. I always joke that oh, I've worked in every dying medium. I did some stuff in radio as on-air talent in college too. I don't know. I think for me, trying to figure out what to do with it, maybe it's like this for everyone. It's felt like you sort of cross off the list of the things you think maybe you could do or you might want to do. I don't know, because I feel like that's still a thing I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah, it's not easy to. I mean, I feel I'm the same way. Did you feel like you were good at just grammar and you just understood writing innately?
I think so. I mean, there's a story I heard growing up that I think I learned to read at a young age, and I guess I was interested in reading at a young age. And I remember being encouraged to sort of keep that kind of a secret, in preschool and stuff, or maybe not in preschool, but definitely early schooling, not to let on that I knew how to to read. But I think I remember first grade or some very early class like that where I pointed out teacher had spelled something wrong on the board. I don't know. I think that I don't know what your attitude is towards it. I think you're more schooled, in writing and stuff than I am.
Yeah, I mean, but it didn't come easy to me. I didn't really write or anything as a kid. It was more like a thing later in life, and then even then it was a struggle for me, and I really wasn't much of a reader. I read R.L. Stine books and
hey, Goosebumps.
A lot of just scary story books, just mostly nothing. And I remember as a kid, we'd go to the library for grade school, and I would just pick out books of old basketball books and just to look at the pictures and laugh at them. It's
what are you laughing at?
Just the uniforms and the haircuts. It's really tight shorts and people jamming, and they have a funny look on their face. So later on, to then go to school, my minor was in professional writing, so learn all those things, and then as far as grammar goes, I remember still struggling with it. I remember that I did horrible with it when I was younger, and then and then obviously in undergrad did that, and then just continued working at it till I went to grad school. And then I remember in grad school I even took a basic grammar class just because I was to understand it on a deeper level, and it's still something that I'm learning and trying to learn, and it's just I think it's just a lot of repetition.
Yeah, I mean, the annoying thing about all those dumb rules, I remember when I started at The Onion, I was oh, okay, I got to get all these style guides, and I got to memorize these things, and the annoying thing is you commit those rules to memory, and then they just a couple of years later, they're oh, that rule, no one did it, so we're getting rid of it, and it doesn't matter anymore. I mean, I think I learned a lot of that stuff, the more formal stuff, the structure and the mechanics of it, on the job, but I feel as time has gone on, fewer and fewer people know about that stuff, care about that stuff, and even necessarily know what the correct answer is.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, I don't know what your approach is. I feel my approach as a writer is to not beat people over the head with all the fancy things you can do. I don't know. Writing is an interesting thing, and I don't really talk about it much with other people for a variety of reasons. I'm not superstitious. I just find usually many writers are annoying.
Yeah.
Where was I going with that? Yeah, I mean, I don't know. There's definitely things that I'm trying to be more intentional about with my writing. I wonder, it would be interesting to track when I was doing more of that performing stuff, whether I was conscious of it or not. Maybe I was actually a little bit more out of my head or not in my head when I sat down to write stuff, whether it's funny or not. I have a feeling in hindsight that definitely was going on. I don't think you would really notice oh, I'm less in my head,
Yeah. Do you
I think you're just less in your head.
Yeah. Have you written a lot of funny stuff, or because I remember talking in an email about that whole thing about how you said a quote here. You said, "I'm not performing or really writing much that could be considered funny, but I feel like it's a big part of my outlook on life."
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really working on anything funny now. I feel like my number one struggle as a writer right now. I don't. See. I think that actually is what's going on. I never actually thought about that until I said that. But it's like, well, I'm sorry. Can you say your question again? See, that's how in my head I am about this stuff. I already.
Well, you said, I was just, for me, for you, you're writing your whole career, and besides The Onion, besides Rolling Stone, you went on, I mean, I don't know if we'll be able to cover everything, but you went on to work at NBC, and
yeah, that's true.
You've conducted hundreds of interviews. I mean, maybe,
yeah.
I don't know, so many things. So it's your writing to me seems like you've mostly been doing it almost as a profession, whereas nobody's really ever paid me. So I've been doing mainly, all my writing has been more comedic and essays, blogs, short fiction things. So, and we were talking about all that on email, and you said that you're not performing or really writing much that could be considered funny, but I feel like it's a big part of my outlook on life.
Yeah.
So I guess the question is more of have you ever done that? Have you ever really wrote for yourself besides for maybe the music or little skits here and there, or how does that that sort of writing work into your life, I guess? Or
it's a thing, I feel like I feel like one of the worst parts of becoming a professional writer is I have this attitude of not wanting to do it now unless people are paying me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like I miss out on a lot of the sort of more laboratory aspects of it. And it's a thing I feel increasingly as time goes on. It's man, I wish I was still doing those exercises that I used to make my students do, of just simple dumb shit of sit down and write out lists of lists. And then, God, do you remember in all those writing classes all the time wasted on free writing, by the way?
Oh yeah, I think that was just the teacher just being all right, let's do a 20-minute free write.
I'm gonna go out and check my email and smoke a cigarette.
Yeah.
It's when I have a writing project going, and I do have my first book coming out this year, which is a thing that everyone around me assumed I would do, because if you're a writer, obviously you're going to do a book.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're a person who never thought about pursuing writing, it's a weird, nothing is a given. And so when I'm on deadline on a thing, and I have a thing that's due, I will be in more of a practice of journaling and trying to think through things and trying to approach ways of thinking about the stuff that I'm going to write about. It's all, I think it feels very serious, and I don't want to say thoughtful, because I think a lot of the comedy stuff is thoughtful, but it's to a point where it feels you fast forward 10 years ago, and the person 10 years later to today is a totally different person, and how did this person have a background in comedy? And I mean, even when I was at The Onion covering comedy stuff, my bosses would call me, the dumb nickname was, oh, he's the comedy guy. I would cover whatever the thing is in comedy that they needed covered. And I don't know, I don't really think I'm a nostalgic person, but I do miss that kind of contact with those types of thinkers and those types of people, as well as doing more of that stupid shit, kind of for myself, or just to sort of explore it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, because there's just so much else going on now, day to day, and there's other things I'm working towards. It's not I feel it's a waste of time or energy.
Mm-hmm.
It's just how do you start a habit that you've kind of fallen out of, and you're not sure what you want to do with it? Because I used to stick to free writing every day, and I'm not going to say it felt like a waste of time, but I feel I need a thing that I'm working on. I can't just sit down and be here's 30 minutes of me just sitting down and writing out prose. I definitely from time to time have funny ideas, and there's funny ideas for things I wish I had written, but
mm-hmm.
I mean, they're not going anywhere, and everything in due time. But I think it sounds bizarre to be yeah, there's all this other stuff I'm doing now. It's very much fueled by the way I think about doing comedy, but the output is so drastically different.
Mm.
So I don't really know if that's an answer to the question, but that's like definitely where I'm at right now.
Well, have you ever, I mean, was there ever a time in your life where you were writing like just straight comedy stuff and what?
Oh, sure. I mean, when we were doing all those classes, I mean, I would be.
Were you writing like sketches or skits or?
Yeah, sketches and skits and I mean, even like, you know, like a pilot would be too embarrassing to discuss here.
You wrote a pilot for like a TV, like an original pilot thing.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. But like, here's the thing though, it was like a drama though. I mean, it's like, I'm not sure. I think too, like, I think to do comedy, I feel like I need to work with other people. And
all right. So you like to collaborate?
I like the collaborative part of it. And I feel like it's easier for me to sit down and pull that stuff out of my head when I'm in conversation with other people. For some reason, like to sit down by myself and to write out something that's going to be funny. Like I've done some things here or there, but I don't think I've ever truly, like I don't think there was like a single sketch I wrote during all those classes where like, I felt comfortable or proud of what I did. Not that I need to be, but I just like, man, I've been doing this for years and it's like, I'm not sure if I'm getting better at it. I don't think I'm getting worse at it, but I don't think I have a knack for this. And maybe that's just me being too harsh. And so it's funny that like, even though I felt that way, like I was still, you know, teaching other people how to do it. I mean, I don't know.
I think that's just how it goes. I mean, it's like, I haven't written sketch in so long pretty much since like Second City, that whole era back then. I mean, I would do that, and now that I'm teaching it, it's just like, well, who am I? I'm not even practicing it, but it's like, I don't know. I feel like I've done it. I feel like I could give notes on it. Like reading a sketch is kind of fun for me. It's kind of more fun than actually writing it, to read someone else's sketch and provide them notes and to help them through. And it's a form of collaboration, which I enjoy too, like a lot. I collaborated with a few people out in Chicago for like doing little videos and stuff like that. And
yeah.
It was always.
You did a novel though too. I mean,
yeah,
like
I did that.
You did a long. I mean, I don't know. I think that's like just like one of the hardest things to do, to like sit down and have the discipline to do it, like to actually do it and to finish it, and then you like tell people about it. Like,
yeah, it was.
I don't think people appreciate like how much work that actually takes, and it's to do a thing like no one's asking you to do.
Yeah, it was one of the hardest things. I wrote two of them. The one I self-published, and then the other one I just wrote, and they both took me about 5 years. And
yeah, I bet.
I always say a funny thing, like my parents, like when I wrote that novel, like nobody gave a crap about it. I mean, my ex-girlfriend didn't read it. My girlfriend now has never read it. My dad tried to read it. He's like, I couldn't get through it.
Ouch.
And, and it was like, but if I bought when I bought a new car, like a few years ago or a couple of years ago, my parents were like super proud. People were acting like it was the biggest accomplishment of my life.
Buying a car and also making a turkey dinner, I feel like were the two most like celebrated things from people, and baking a pie. Hey, other people's metrics are different for these things.
And I was like, you understand, like you're just saying, it's like how much time and effort and probably how much time I took off my life, and how I spent 5 years like in a world basically that was like on a different plane of existence, and editing and thinking and obsessing. And it's like they don't even I don't know, if people who write or people who do any sort of writing, I'm just, you know, I think it's pretty cool to have somebody who could, no matter what form they're doing or what format, that it's like they sat down. And you know, nowadays people can't even, you know, sit down for like a minute or so without checking their phone or doing a lot of things. So it's like to have that discipline and to use that brain power and focus it in on something that you're trying to make funny or trying to make entertaining or whatever you're trying to do, I just think is like super interesting, and just such a great use of brain power, and then the editing process as well, of like combing through it again and again and again, and finessing it so it's like perfect. I don't know. I just think it's I appreciate it more than I think the majority of people do.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think it's cool you have a car too, but I think I think the novel is it's one of those things that like a lot of people say they're going to do or want to do, but I mean, there's that whole NaNoWriMo thing, you know. And, you know, a lot of cool stuff has come out of that, but like that's the thing too, where like people need there's like that camaraderie there to kind of buoy people. But 5 years sounds about right.
So so your book coming up, how long or when did you start that, or what was that process like? Because I mean, again, I don't know if the one listener who's listening in right now will be fine, but I love talking about like writing processes and stuff like that. Like I'm like a huge geek about it, and like you said, most writers are annoying. Like I went to grad school thinking, again, like as I did with The Onion or Rolling Stone, that it would be some amazing experience with these amazing people who just get me and this and that, but the majority of them, it's just like everything else in life. It's like there's some cool people for sure, but they're not all.
I mean, I don't even keep in touch with anyone I met from Rolling Stone, because like I was there, and I think this is like when things in media were really starting to be disrupted by the internet. Like everyone was just gone by like they did that reality show, and there were a couple people that like I worked with, but everyone was just gone, and like they like went to like, I don't know, like they're in charge of copy for Madison Square Garden, or one person went to MTV. Like they all dispersed, and like I was just an intern who was there for some summer, and barely, you know, I was subsumed with some project they gave me, so I made no real impact or contact with anybody. But like, I mean, it took me a long time to realize like the value of like what I got my degree in. And like it took many years of like doing work as, you know, writing about entertainment, doing journalism about entertainment, where I came to understand like the thing that really interests me as a writer when doing reporting work is like I'm interested in like how like industries resist change and actively make them worse, and I'm interested in like a lot of stuff about perceptions about the internet and sort of the way it kind of obscures us, like thinking about the way we treat each other. It's all kind of heavy stuff that I don't think is really that related to the comedy stuff, but it's related to the book because like 5 years ago. So I think it actually tracks with what you were saying about your book, because like 5 years ago I started this project, where I'm doing like a ton of interviews.
Is that the Don't Die?
Yeah, it's the Don't Die interview series that I do, which people can check out. I'm sure you'll give them the link.
Yeah, there'll be a link on the webpage for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it came out of like a lot of curiosities that I had, and it also came out of this feeling that like I'm not really seeing reporting on the kind of questions that I have about like those kind of broader topics.
Well, I read an article that you shared that's also from USA Weekly, I think, or USA Today.
USA Today, yeah, from like it was 5 years ago.
Yeah, so that's probably when it started, or.
Yeah, it started late 2014, but
it was basically like the video game industry was almost like just the whole culture that is today with politics, where people are sending death threats and just being crazy over content or games, and the writers and the producers of these games are treated kind of like Hollywood system, where they're not getting compensated. It's just like, what the fuck?
Well, there's like a lot of online abuse, and I think there was a lot of stuff that was swimming around where there were a lot of like attitudes of like behaving like video games, like and like the cultures and subcultures around them, like created basically treating other people like shit. And I feel like you go back in time, and there have to be previous examples of people treating each other like shit. Before video games and before the internet, and I just was really fascinated in like why it seemed to be so sticky to blame these kind of things on people who were interested in games, and why it's so sticky to sort of talk like, people who use the internet, like this stuff kind of exists in a vacuum. Like if you're interested in video games, like that's the sole thing driving the way you're behaving and treating other people. So, I mean, that's kind of a through line too. Is like when I was at places like The Onion, like I helped introduce like a video game section, which was like a huge push uphill where like, like we're taking all these other forms of entertainment seriously, so why not also video games? And I just had a lot of questions at that time, 4 or 5 years ago, as I still do, about the way these things are thought about, the way these things are written about, and the way these things are, the limits to the way these things can be considered. And so, I started just doing interviews because I felt like I'm tired of kind of waiting for permission to do stories about the stuff I'm curious about. And at the time, editors weren't really sharing my curiosity. And so I just sort of started with like a couple questions that I had and trying to, find people to talk to. And it just kind of grew and grew. And the questions got bigger and bigger.
And how'd you find these people that you were just locating them, sending them an email and being like, hey, and just kind of give them a rundown? And a lot of them.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I don't really pay attention to, this is I think part of, that's the other thing I want to say. It's like, a lot of writers are annoying, but that's just because a lot of people are annoying in general. And so, I mean, I don't know, like one of the big turnoffs about like writers and things for me is like, I'm not really that fixated on like, well, what's my brand and how big is my audience and how much of an impact am I making? Like, I'm always interested in like, can I write about this stuff to like explore what I'm curious in, and the point of it is to just do it. It's not to necessarily like affect some sort of outcome or to like be seen doing it. And so I don't know, I mean, I think I built up a reputation like over the last 10 years, and I think a lot of people like at least knew of me and my work and like where I'm coming from. And so like I had a bunch of contacts already, like people who like were up for talking, kind of being the first guinea pigs. But like I found people through like, social media and just sort of really making a big push as you do at the beginning of a project. And I don't know, man. I mean, it really wasn't like a goal of like, and then I'll do a book. Like I thought I would be done after a year of doing it, where it's like, I'll learn everything I wanted to learn. But yeah, I mean, it led to, I want to say like 2 Decembers ago, like being introduced to a publisher, and we set up like a Skype call like week before Christmas. And they were like, like your work's really interesting. Like, let's talk about maybe doing a book together. Why don't you come up with a few ideas? And like, I pitched them like 3 ideas. They didn't like any of them. and then over the course of the call, like I guess like in the way you do in these pitch meetings, like just tap dancing, like we hit on a thing, which they then greenlit, and then I spent most of last year. December 2018. Then I think it took until July the next year for paperwork to finally be put together. And then I did a bunch of interviewing that. I don't know. I lose track of time. Never mind all this COVID stuff. But yeah, I mean, like I spent a year doing all the reporting on it, doing a bunch more interviews for that. And then, knock on wood, the writing has been pretty quick. Like I turned in the book last year, and we're now like going through the process of like finalizing edits, and we'll just see. I think it'll be out this year. It was supposed to be out this spring, but it's a global pandemic and the factories were shut down, so we couldn't print them up. So
yeah. And what's the book called again?
Book is called All the Rage, and so it's like an oral history of Blame, the internet, and kind of video games. I mean, video games are a big part of it, but it's more like it's more about like online subcultures and the kind of habits of like lazy thinking that we tend to have when we think about like blame and the internet. So, I mean, I feel like that sounds like hyper academic and serious compared to like starting from a place of comedy. Like I swear it sounds super serious, but there are moments that are pretty funny in the book, even though it's about this really, really heavy, awful shit. So,
So did you infuse comedy like naturally, or do you think that you like were aware of it, or how what was your style as far as like writing, or was there a voice to it, or did you just write in your own?
So the book is an oral history, which is a term I'm learning most people actually don't know, but like that means that 100% or 99% of the book is like my job as writer is more in like editor.
All right.
Although it is being edited and stuff, it's all like arranging excerpts from all these. I did 90 interviews for it.
Wow.
And those are separate from the ones for Don't Die. So a lot of the work was like, and that's why I needed to do so much like free writing and stuff. It's like, well, I couldn't write anything myself. So it's like, well, what is it? Like, it wasn't like the kind of thing where it's like, all right, I'm going to do dozens and dozens of interviews to like prove some point I have. It's like starting with a couple of questions, seeing where other people go, and then trying to honor that, while also making sure there's like a good mix of like what other people think. So I think just like necessarily like there are moments of like comic relief, because I think nobody wants to read like a really depressing book that's going to anger them. Like, I think it's important. It's all that comedy stuff again, where like you got to build up tension and then break it in an unexpected way. And that's why people laugh, I guess. But that's also, I think, like how you keep people's attention and like hold on to it rather than, because like if it's just like one thing over and over and over again, it's really boring. I'm sure you know more of like the mechanics of this stuff than I do, just with like your studies and stuff. But I don't think it was a thing where I ever sat down and I was like, oh, this book should also be funny in spots.
Yeah.
I think it was just like, like when it's like properly announced and out, like I'm not sure what your interest level is, if you'll wind up wanting to read it, or if you'll just wind up being proud of me for making a turkey dinner someday. But
no, it sounds interesting. I like reading. I don't typically read all funny stuff or watch all funny stuff. It's like kind of like Mick. I remember he's like, I never seen an episode of Seinfeld, or like doesn't watch any comedy or anything like that.
Well, the end of his book is like, don't be a fat slob who never goes outside because you're always doing improv. Like have a life and other
exactly.
So,
and I mean, it's just such a, I don't know, I feel like it's just such a relevant topic, and I'm kind of the same way as you are. I mean, I kind of like taking a wide sample and kind of, I mean, the idea, like you said, you're not directing, you didn't come up with some objective and be like, I'm going to go find 90 people to agree with my point of view or my opinion. It's like, that's kind of exactly what I'm into. It's like just taking a wide sample of people who are maybe experts on the topic or have something to say that's interesting, and
right.
Editing that into a way that's digestible to the reader and that's interesting. I mean, it sounds like a cool book. Like I'll definitely will read it.
I'll definitely. Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I remember when I started, like, I don't know for you what your whole creative process is, or if you bristle at that term, but like for me, I always feel like, well, there's no way I can do this thing. Like that's part of like the beginning of the thing. It's like I know the thing I want to do, and not feeling inadequate to it, but like it's like, all right, well, I'm just gonna like break my back, like doing tons of research, becoming like, if not an expert, like very aware of all these types of things, and then starting to form opinions about like, what am I noticing about like all this stuff I'm taking in, and what would I like to see out there that's not out there. But yeah, I mean, like, even though it's not really from all my other interviews, like, it's obviously informed by it. But like, even though the writing was fairly quick, and there were a lot of interviews, even though that process was like kind of condensed in like a couple of months 2 winters ago. I mean, I wouldn't have been able to do that if I hadn't 5 years ago, started doing all those interviews. So I think 5 years for like a thing that you're doing on your own to turn into a book. I don't know if that sounds long or fast to people. That just, to me, that sounds about right.
Yeah, that sounds, for me, unless you're like Stephen King or and one of these other writers that are cranking out more than a book a year or something like that. But yeah, for me, I mean, it seems like a standard for a decent amount of people. I mean, And especially if you have life to contend with as well, and you have other responsibilities like relationships or work or just everything else that goes, turkey dinners.
Gotta buy a car or something. The fundamentals of being an adult. I remember when I was a kid, I used to think like the epitome, like being a man, like you become a man when you can touch the ceiling in any room in your house. It could be just one room. I'm not doing a bit. This is what I actually thought when I was a kid. Right. So you would be able to touch the ceiling when you learn to whistle and when you learn to snap your fingers. Like, that's like, okay, puberty has started.
It's a good test,
know. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I can do all three now, so I guess I must be a man. But
you passed the test. So
inconclusive. Yeah.
I just want to ask you a little bit more before we start wrapping this up here, but
yeah, sure.
Just the I guess what is your I mean, because a lot of the stuff that you sent me or that you've done a lot of interviews with people.
Yeah.
And so is that something you ever thought that you wanted to do? I mean, because the writing, it sounds like you were saying, it's just kind of like a fluke that happened, and now you're into it. And I don't know. It seems like sounds like you still question it to a degree. But the interview seems to be a constant stream, and I was just wondering, like, how you got into that. If it was just another part of the writing, and what your thoughts on
sorry, go ahead.
Just what your thoughts are on like interviewing people and conducting them.
Yeah, it's funny for somebody who does so many of them. No one ever asks me that. But like, similar to the last 5 years leading into the book, I mean, like the interviewing is something I got a lot of experience doing. Maybe not so much at Rolling Stone. Like at the end of the internship, they let me write up one thing that involved like some actual reporting. That was so long ago. I remember using like a Radio Shack phone tap that actually would like plug into the jack, and I remember using like audio cassettes.
Nice. Yeah, I think I sold those. I worked at Radio Shack.
Oh, that's right.
When I was out in California, on Sunset Boulevard.
That was the one that River Phoenix died in, that Radio Shack?
Did he die in a Radio Shack?
No, he died at the Viper Club, I think.
Really?
Street.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah.
Sorry. The Viper Room, yeah.
Down the street, yeah.
I tried to support Radio Shack, so you can't pin that one on me. Even in 2005. I think, like, the interviewing is an interesting thing. It's a thing that I even hesitate now to call them interviews because they try to be conversations like you and I are having. But it's a thing I just built up a lot of experience with, since The Onion, since the very end of Rolling Stone. I think the difference is, like, when I was at The Onion, I was basically working 3 people's jobs as we were dealing with, like, expanding into online and figuring out what that meant and what that looked like and how we should measure success. And so by necessity, I think, like, I really credit, like, my approach to interviewing to how overworked I was at The Onion, where, like, I think each of those interviews I approached in the way I was talking about with, like, this book, where it's like, well, I'm not an expert on such and such person, and there's no way I could get an interesting conversation out of, whatever comedian or musician or.
Well, Gallagher, for instance, I read that one, and it's pretty fascinating, like the stuff that he says and his thoughts.
There used to be audio with that.
Oh, really?
Article,
nice.
Because no one would believe reading it that was a conversation that.
Is he getting progressively louder as the interview?
Well, it's just like the things he was saying. It's like it's worth hearing it in his voice, but also like the types of things he was saying, and to just hear it coming out of a mouth, and to hear, another person, I guess in this case, like me in my early 20s, like just sort of dealing with that in real time and still trying to be, like the professional one.
Were you in the room with him?
It was over the phone.
Oh, shit.
and the funny thing is, like, yeah, so, I mean...
Yeah, if anybody listens, you got to read that interview. It's a great... And I think one of the fascinating things for me really quick was just like you kind of just, I mean, well, you start off with a question, then he's like saying, "Oh, you're gonna attack me right away," and it's kind of like, he like became very defensive, and then it felt like you just gave little things after that, and he just kind of went, and I was like, that was great. I mean, like, you just got him talking, and he just kept going and going about like a lot of things.
So I think that like the writing, like I think that's a skill I have that I don't really understand, or I don't think I'm intentional about, is like I give other people, I think it's an improv thing too. It's like you give people other space to breathe and to react and to not be judged. And
yeah,
like, I think for like, as far as the Onion and like that Gallagher thing, like I think like it's in that bio thing, I guess you'll post, but like that's really, I think, like my legacy. It's the thing that people remember most about my time there. I don't know how to feel about that. I understand it. But I think that like that is a thing very much informed by like just being so overworked there at that time, where I was like, all right, well, I want to just like find a thing to have an interesting conversation about with this person. Like, I don't want to talk about like their new album, their new special, the new thing that they're pushing, because like everyone else, like that's a very easy interview to have that this person can go and do elsewhere.
Well, you looked up something from Oregon or something, and then that's how it kicked off.
Yeah, I mean, and that's that thing too, where it's like just be like obsessively thorough, like doing your homework. I think that was the thing that I got very much schooled in there, is like you come prepared, and I don't know about like as far as like just like the. It's funny because like I feel like as time has gone on, I'm not sure people are even aware that like that's where I come from, is like I am a writer, and that's how I got my start. And that's sort of like the point of doing all these interviews, is to like write stuff about it, because it's been funny to track, like as I post all these interviews through these last 5 years, like people would go from, oh, I really enjoyed your new post, or like they would still call them like not articles, but they would call them posts, or all the way through to now, where people, I don't know if they may do this with your podcast, where they now refer to my interviews as, oh yeah, I'd love to come on your show. So I think that like there's really not this broader awareness, and it's probably equally my fault because I haven't written anything of note. I haven't been able to top that Gallagher interview. But I mean, that's been a thing that I've done for many, many years, is interviews, but I don't really know. I mean, I'm happy to talk about it. I don't really know. I probably have opinions about the way I approach it and why, but I don't think I've ever. It's like the writing stuff. It's like, I don't know. I sit down and I do this, and this is what comes out. And
well, I think like you said something. You said it like it's something about your personality, and that you allow people the room to be themselves, and you give them the room to breathe. And like that's one of the reasons I started this, because it's like I've had lots of maintained a lot of relationships. Like we were talking, like. You know, me and you email people for long amounts of time. We have long extended phone conversations, and even strangers sometimes, people I meet at work, it's like, I'll just start talking to them. Like some of the stuff that they start talking about, I'm like, Jesus Christ. I'm like, why are you telling me this? But,
I have that too.
and it's just like, I don't know if it's something that, like, it's got to be something. And I just also really like it. So I don't know. I think it's, I don't know. Do you enjoy like doing the interviews and all that?
Oh, for sure. I mean, there's always like, I think the thing with like the interviews I'm doing now, and I think maybe it's true. I don't know. Maybe it's true of like 10, 15 years ago, which is crazy to think I've been doing that stuff that long. Sometimes like I'm not interested in like what the answer to a question is. I'm interested to hear like a question responded to. Sometimes almost like, well, what do people think about the question? Like, I think sometimes I talk to people and they don't make that distinction because it's coming out of my mouth. They think like, oh, this is the thing he thinks, and maybe sometimes like judging me a little for thinking it. I don't know. That makes it all sound a little mind gamey. I don't think. Hopefully, it doesn't feel like that.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I think that's a better way of doing it. I mean, I don't have any answers to anything. I mean,
no, me neither.
I think the person who has it figured out, it's like you wouldn't even really want to listen to that interview. I mean, I know of some people who are not personally, but just podcasts I listen to or interviews I see where a person is just they know everything, they know how everything's supposed to be, and it just becomes I mean, it could be funny or entertaining at a certain point, but then after a while it's just the same old, and it's like, all right, I get your perspective on things, let the guest talk. Or
yeah, I mean, of course I wouldn't be doing these interviews I've been doing the last few years and beyond if I didn't enjoy it. I think that like something that's as true today as like 5 years ago when I started it. It's like I don't think it's like a quote unquote normal thing to do, like unless you do call it a podcast or something. But I mean, this opens up a whole other can of worms. I know you said you wanted to wrap up, but it's like I think it's just kind of unfortunate that like the idea of like all the attention that that like Don't Die has gotten, like the fact that like it seems so strange to people or interesting or unusual that like, hey, two people are just going to talk on the internet and like they're not going to be screaming at each other, they're not going to be like trying to label or criticize or condemn the other person. It's like it was very much against the grain, 5 years ago, and it still is. And,
yeah, for sure.
I don't really know what to say about that other than like I recognize that's a thing.
Have a lot. I mean, yeah. I mean, to me, it's refreshing. Anytime anyone could have a conversation, because I personally am just so sick of all the back and forth with politics or. I mean, even going back to improv, and we talked a little bit about like Alan Watts and stuff like that. It's like the whole thing about reaching this level of enlightenment where it's almost like you don't have any opinions on anything. And
yeah, I remember that being a thing, and like when I started it, where I was like, well, why do you need to have an opinion? Or do I need to have an opinion about this thing? Or like I remember like years and years ago, like it being mind blowing. I was like, whoa, not everything has to be binary. Like there could be a third thing. I mean, it's I don't know, the Alan Watts thing. There was a quote I read like a week or two ago where he's talking about like, well, like the point of like a concerto or an opera is like not the final note that's hit. Like I've been thinking about that a lot, where I feel like you get involved with like these big. I think improv is a big part of that too. Like in some way, where it's like, well, this goes back to the goal-oriented stuff too. Where it's like, well, maybe it's not to accomplish anything, but it's like, the point of it is to do it and the kind of experience you have through the ride. So I think that's like one of the big things, like, from where you and I met, not in the first place, but at Annoyance and beyond, like that's really like, I think been like the big thing that's changed, my DNA, my outlook on kind of everything.
Of just trying to be on the ride and just trying to not get so caught up in the result.
I mean, I don't know if Steve Martin coined it, but I remember reading in his book that he had something somewhere that said like, you buy the ticket, you take the ride. Yeah, it's kind of like a Hunter S. Thompson thing, I think, too. Buy the ticket. Oh, Rolling Stone, full circle. What did he say? I think he said something like the same: buy the ticket, take the. I don't know, because he was definitely on a ride. That's for sure. I mean. Oh yeah, well maybe it was from him then. I don't know where that quote came from. Yeah, but it's yeah, I think the older I get, the more I don't know. I just had an opinion on something the other day, and whenever I form it, I was like telling my girlfriend, I'm like, because this house that we're living in is being sold, or in the process of being sold, and somebody came to look at it on Sunday, and they were going to put in an offer, but they wanted a third bedroom, and that's the room that I'm in now. And I was like, oh, they're not going to come see this room. They're just going to be like, oh, screw this house, I'm not going to buy it. And I was like, there's no way they're going to put a kid in this room. And of course they bought it, so we have to move. Oh, but shit. I was just like, every time I think that I have something figured out, or I think I know something, the universe just throws it in my face. Like, I don't know. That's what it seems to be. Does that frustrate you, or do you think like? I think it's like an exciting thing. It frustrated me at first, just because it's like. Well, if you have to move and find a new place, that's a different thing. Oh, well, that's fine. But I'm just saying the things about like the opinion thing, like having an opinion and thinking that I have to be right about it. And now it's just kind of a funny thing. It's just kind of a reminder whenever I have any sort of solid
thoughts or belief on anything, that it's just it just gets thrown back in my face, and it's like, just don't stop trying to do that. Stop trying to figure it out. I don't know. And I think everybody is different, and I think everybody just I think it's important to like listen to whatever signs you're being given, or whatever way you're like leaning in life, however it's pushing you, and to kind of like hop on board that ride or whatever, and kind of just enjoy it.
Yeah. I guess like the choice before us now, you know, during like pandemic and quarantine and stuff, is like, are you going to be the dog, or are you going to be the misogynist? Like, how are you going to react? I guess this would be one of those things where like maybe there's a third path. I don't know. That's a whole other trip, man. There's like kind of the way like globally, nationally, et cetera, like we're all kind of being thrown for this loop of thinking about these kinds of things.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was another huge shock, and a lot of people are saying it on podcasts and stuff like that. So sometimes I feel like I'm just reiterating things that I hear, but it's just I don't know. I think it just really shows you that nothing's secure, that this life isn't safe or guaranteed, and I don't know. Like a lot of people are saying, just do. I think and it's what I've been doing my whole life. I've basically been living by my own rules and standards, and
right
within society's limits of what I have to do to survive, like pay taxes or have a job or do whatever. But I've never, kind of like you, it's like I didn't really know what I wanted to do exactly for a long time, and I never really wanted to get pigeonholed into something. And that, I don't know, it sounded like your outlook in the beginning was, I don't know if I'm putting words in your mouth, but it sounded like you were just kind of like that was something that you didn't want. And I think the older I thought I wanted it at first, but then like eventually I was like, I don't know. I feel like if you get a job that you are just doing over and over again, 40 hours a week, you stop growing, you stop learning, and you just become complacent, and your life basically ends.
I got news for you. It's going to end either way. But,
yeah, it definitely will, but it could end sooner, I guess, when you still...
Oh, for sure. Yeah, nothing's promised to anybody. Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, so what do you... I mean, yeah, I'm not in a rush or anything. I didn't want to say that before, so we keep going here. But what are you going to... So the book's coming out, like what happens after the book comes out? You're just going to kind of see what happens, or...
Yeah, I mean, it sounds cynical. Maybe I've said this on email to you before, but for the one listener you have, this will be everything to say. You know, like from people I know who have written books, like they kind of say, well, don't write a book for the money. Books are kind of more like business cards you use that like can open doors by people who like need to be impressed in that way. Like it's like, in other words, it's like for opportunities like you probably could do before you wrote the book, but there's something about like telling people, oh, I did a book and blah 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 blah. They're like, oh, really interesting. Well, like suddenly like it gives you this like gravitas or whatever. So I don't really know. I mean, like it's still all like up in the air, like when it's going to come out and what the plan is going to be to like try to make noise for it and get it noticed. And those are all kind of things that are very opposite to the way that I try to exist as a writer, which is like to just put stuff out, like make it, put stuff out. And I remember like even at The Onion, that kind of being the thing where like with print deadlines and stuff, like by the time it's out into the world, like because it was wrapped probably 2 weeks before, like I've already forgotten it and I'm working on other stuff. So this will be an interesting challenge of like, who's going to be interested in talking to me and what do I have to say about it? And can I talk about it and like not get people mad at me or put my foot in my mouth in some unexpected way?
Yeah.
Other than that, yeah.
Go on. Oh, you're good.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, other than that, like, I'm just sort of taking opportunities as they come, and I had some stuff lined up before all this hit that is very much up in the air and uncertain. I mean, I'm kind of tinkering on another book that I think is a little bit more spiritually aligned with some of the stuff we're talking about, like with like creativity and like, you know, marching to the, you know, your own beat. But that's super early days where we're still like, we've been working on it since January.
And that's a collaboration project?
Yeah, that's a collaboration with a friend I've known for a while who is working out of DePaul right now, and he's into all sorts of interesting stuff, like with like maker spaces, and he's like a computer science dude. Like he's got a certain. I don't think he's like a performer. I should ask him. But he's like one of the funniest guys I know. And so that's actually a thing I'm hoping for with that book, is like some of that natural humor might shine through a little more, while also reconnecting with some of that teaching stuff you and I were talking about. So that's on the back burner. I'm taking some stuff as it pops up, and just trying to not lose my head
yeah.
with like everything being up in the air. But you know, living as a freelance writer and living sort of floating between things, like I kind of have joke like, oh, this is like the Olympics I've been preparing for, you know, for years. Like, so I think like maybe improv stuff ties into this too, where it's like, yeah, like I'm comfortable being uncomfortable, not knowing where this stuff is going to go. But, you know, my hope is after like a lot of tosses and turns and things not coming through, that like either through the book or through something else, like this will be kind of turning a new page on stuff. And it's funny, I feel more like, yeah, once things are a little bit more stable, a little bit more set, like I feel more like I want to get back into like playing music rather than performing comedy. I don't know why that is. I think it's more like interested in like doing stuff that doesn't involve using words. So like playing music, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a whole language upon itself, I feel like. Right.
So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of where things are at now. I mean, I'm keeping on doing my interviews, and so this was like a nice, you know, nice change of pace, because I didn't have to ask any questions.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's we started off the episode with a story about
an accusation.
An accusation of me going downtown to and you interviewing me, and now the tables have turned.
Yeah.
And you, but unlike you, I'm going to give you the job.
Oh, thank you. All right, well, let me know. I'll send you some references if you change your mind.
But no, it's been great talking to you, and yeah, I mean, I think just on the book, like you're saying, it's like could possibly lead to teaching opportunities too. It sounds like that's something you're interested in.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, we'll see. That's the other thing I've learned too, is like do a book and don't expect like any particular outcomes from it.
Yeah, definitely. Because I mean, one of the reasons I went to grad school, I was like, well, I guess I could go to teach, because I was like, I don't know what the hell else to do. Right. And I'm like, but then now I'm just like, well, now I need a book. I'm like, well, I have a self-published book, but I can't. They're not as impressed by that.
Who's they though? Like who is this they we're doing all
academia?
This stuff for? Yeah. Well, I don't have a terminal degree, so that's kind of a non-starter, as they call it. Although you do.
Yeah, I do. Maybe they'll meet me in the middle somewhere.
Maybe we could do get a really tall trench coat. And
yeah.
you could be on the top, and you could just say you're me, although with your degree.
Well, I should be tall enough to touch the ceiling, and then as long as I could snap and whistle, I should be all right.
Yeah, see, there's no wrong ideas in brainstorming. It's just a thing. It's an idea I feel like I want to disprove that.
Well, cool, man. I was going to ask you too, do you have any, before we end, do you have any music at all from your old band days that you could share, or is it all?
Oh gosh. Yeah, I'm sure I could dig it up.
Well, if you want, it's up to you. I mean, this one listener who's been hanging on throughout this almost 2.5 hour conversation.
They're demanding it.
They want to know either the variety show or the Battle of the Bands noise generators, or one of the other ones, one of the lemonade stands or something.
I'll dig it up. I'm sure it would be thoroughly embarrassing. Not for me, for the other people I was doing it with. So.
All right, cool, man.
I'll dig it up and I'll get it to you if you want it. Yeah.
Well, again, it's been great talking with you, and thanks again for doing this.
Yeah, man, for sure.
It's been a blast.
All right, dude.
All right, well, thanks a lot, everyone, and hope you enjoyed the episode, and that is it. Good night.
Smell you later.